Hola, hola! Welcome everybody to Season 3 of the Chicago Techies Podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting the voices of Chicago Techies and their experiences. This season, we will be hearing from seasoned entrepreneurs to rising stars making their mark. We'll dive into their triumphs, their challenges, and all the unique experiences that have shaped their journeys. I'm your host, Ceci Fischer-Benitez. Thanks for joining us. Elina, thank you so much for joining me at the Chicago Techies Podcast. I'm super excited to have you and to have this conversation with you. So why don't you tell our listeners your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and your current role?
Certainly happy to be here, Ceci. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Elina Kasman. I am from the suburbs of Chicago. And my current role is Vice President of Business Development.
Amazing. And you and I both met recently last year at the Chicago Blend Fellowship Program. And you told me about your role at your previous role and all of that. But I want to kind of go back all the way back. Where did you grow up? What schools did you go to? What was that childhood experience for you going into adulthood?
Ooh, what a loaded question. So I like to tell people that I was born in a country that no longer exists. I was born in the Soviet Union. I left the Soviet Union when I was 12 years old. It was still the Soviet Union. It is modern day Ukraine. That's where I was born. And then I moved to Israel with my mom, and I lived my formative years there. So I finished high school, and my undergraduate degree I received from Israel's Technion. Let's see, what else did you? Oh, what was childhood like?
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious because what is it like growing in Europe, essentially, right? In another country, like super different from the US.
Yeah. So funny enough, I just gave that interview to my college daughter who was writing a paper on sociology, and she asked me all the same questions. So it's interesting. So that was like an hour and a half long interview. I'm not going to recite it. The major differences, of course, if you take away the language differences, the culture of communication is very different. The culture of communication within the family, within the authority figures, including your teachers, your parents, your grandparents, other authority figures around you. This is all different. Mm-hmm. So when I came to the US, when I came to Israel, I had to learn the way it was done in the Western world, because the culture there is yet different, but more similar to what we experience here. And then when I came to the United States, I had to learn it all over again. It was always a confusion for me as to why humans interact in a certain way. What is it they say? Their body language. So it was really fascinating for me to observe and learn and kind of try to decipher what all of it means and how can I be part of that. So I put a lot of deliberate effort into learning that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I was always curious about that even while we were interacting in our program. I was like, I wonder what her life was like. But I'm curious about your formative years, right? Like as you are growing up and you're going through high school, you're going through undergrad, like what was that journey like into your career? Did you always know from a young age that you wanted to go into some type of engineering?
No, not at all. So when I was little, I really wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
My mom was a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. So I was like, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a teacher. And then my uncle became a software engineer, and he would bring home these perforated cards, and from his studies at the university. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. And he would bring me these little microchips. I was like, oh, I want to, be a software developer when I grow up. So I kind of like when between those two, I think I started leaning more towards the software development, the programming role. And then when I got to ninth grade in Israel, and high school in Israel is 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It's only 3 years. So ninth grade was still middle school. And we had a soldering class. And I really enjoyed soldering. I was really good at it. And it was so satisfying to me, putting together these electronic circuits. And I was like, I'm going to go and pursue, electrical engineering because I like soldering.
So let's shift to that technical expertise, actually. You have over 20 years experience now as a like a technologist in different ways. What are some of your, I guess, what are some of the key projects or achievements that you're particularly proud of?
I did a lot of different things in my technical career. I think a big answer would be that what I am proud of and share often is that I changed my industry multiple times. So I had that skill set and ability to be a process engineer, but the technology itself is kind of like you can change that. And I went from one industry to another industry. So I think this ability to be adaptable and flexible in technical sense, I think that's probably, I'm really glad that I had that knowledge to and not just knowledge, but also this capacity to absorb a new technology, a set of new skills, and be productive in entirely different technological areas. So, for example, I started out of college. I had expertise in fabrication of microelectronic circuits and expertise in fabricating microelectronic mechanical systems. And then after doing that for some time, I ended up working for a company that was making abrasives, and they needed expertise in surface preparation. Okay, polishing of surfaces, making them flat and smooth as an incoming material. So that's a completely different methodology, completely different technique than taking that material and going with it for the next step. But I took all that information. I took all of those techniques I learned from what materials I had available. And then I was able to build onto that and develop that process further to achieve better results than what I started with.
So tell me about microfabrication, because you're talking about this specialty and this this is all foreign to me. So I have no idea what you're talking about. So for anyone that has no experience, what does that all mean?
Yeah. Thank you for pointing this out. It's my own fault. I should know not to use technical jargon, and I should do better. So microfabrication is basically like the word micro is something very, very tiny. So fabrication is just making something. So if it's just making something very tiny. That's all it is, really. That's all it is. Now, when you talk about semiconductor devices, right, again, well, what is a semiconductor device? Should we go into the physics of it? But the reality is it's all these smart chips that go inside your smartphones, your computers, that are built out of the smallest building blocks of transistors and diodes that are mostly still based on single crystal silicon material, and you build on top of them. So the fabs that we're talking about, that we hear about in the news, maybe nowadays more than previously because of the efforts in the Chips for Science Act. But all of that is all related to the microfabrication, but for the purpose of making these devices, making those chips. But also making mechanical devices. That's where the microelectronic mechanical systems comes and play, the MEMS devices, where not only are you making electronic circuits right? That turn on and off the signal and gives you the zeros and ones that the computer can operate with, but also a physical structure that if you cantilevers and valleys and actual membranes, you can also build those on microscopic scale and do something with them depending on what you need done. A good example that I think people can relate to would be medical devices that need to go into the human body, and they're microscopic.
I see. Thank you for that explanation. I think I have a better understanding now of some of the things that I know about your background and what you've done. Have you always worked on microfabrication, or what has been your journey for the last few years?
Right. So I'm going to step back a little bit further than 10 years, and I'm going to take let's say 15 years. So I was working for this abrasives manufacturer on surface preparation, and I was the process engineer, and my job was to develop processes using company products that we manufactured and to make sure that these products work for customer needs. So after doing that for a number of years, I was feeling a little bit repetitive, and I was like, I'm a little bored. So that's when I went and I looked for another job, and I started working at Argonne National Lab. And I was brought in as the expert in polishing of single crystal materials. They needed someone to prepare these single crystal based optical elements for X-ray diffraction to be used at the advanced photon source. So now I used a lot of big words and a lot of technical kind of jargon, but the point was that I seemingly did the same thing on a similar type of equipment, but I was acutely aware that I might get bored doing the same thing for a number of years. And I liked Argonne. It's a cool place. It's a national lab. There was a lot going on, still is a lot going on. And I wanted to stick around. I was like, I do not want to be bored in my job here because I want to stick around. So how do I make sure that I don't get bored? And I started looking around. It's a big organization of like 3,000 people, a lot of different science, a lot of different activities happening. And that's kind of how I got into the commercialization part of activities. I came from industry, so I was aware of the commercial impact of science and technology on the manufacturing, on products that we buy, on economy. And so I was not satisfied with just science. I was like, okay, how do I play a role in making sure that our science that we develop beautifully inside a national lab makes its way to the marketplace and contributes positively to the U.S. economy? So that was kind of like my pursuit. And I did a number of things on that path. I call them co-curricular activities because I did those in parallel with my job. Sometimes I was paid, kind of part of my time was paid for doing these activities. And that's how kind of you pursue. And when you're in a national lab, you have this flexibility of pursuing these opportunities, saying, hey, boss, there is this program. It's going to pay, a certain percentage of my time for a certain period of time, for a number of months, for example. Can I go do that? And my boss would say, yeah, sure. This is your job. This is what your expectations are. They need to be fulfilled. And if you feel that you can pursue that for this period of time, absolutely, this is a great thing to do. So I did the customer discovery training through the Energy I-Core program twice.
Wow.
That's the commercialization. So the first time it was a new program that the DOE offered. So I was part of the first cohort, and I talked my coworker into using his technology that was in the process of being patented to go with that through the program. And then after a number of years, I learned a lot through the program. I did my own technical developments in the lab. I ended up getting my own patent. And I was like, oh, this patent, this technology would be perfect to take through this process. So I was trying to find people to do that because it's in many ways it's an educational program. I couldn't find anyone to do it, so I ended up going through the program again myself. I applied for these Next Generation Leaders program within Argonne, and working on the circular economy initiative. I was following this path of kind of like seeing where I can be impact or where I can be useful. And then I had an opportunity to be part of the DOE's Department of Energy's Small Business Innovation Research SBIR program, to inform the Department of Energy of the needs of the light source facilities, the advanced photon source. And then that led into me becoming a detailee, which is a glorified admin, you could say, but that means I worked alongside the program manager from Department of Energy to help manage these proposals by small businesses. That's a really, really long-winded explanation that I'm sure you'll cut somehow.
I'm glad that we're walking through this journey, because I was curious about it, and I wanted people to know the level of expertise that you have. You have so much opportunity. You have so much growth that you experienced in the last 15 years at Argonne, that it completely makes sense for you to become an investor, for you to know the ins and outs of business development, of working in a lab, of working with grants, working with the government, like the Department of Energy. Like, you have this incredible experience that I knew was there. I just didn't know how it was all structured. So I'm glad that you
make me sound so important.
Well, no, you are. I think I definitely think you should be very proud of your trajectory, of your journey, because I personally think this is incredibly impressive. I've been reading a lot about energy, and especially quantum, which we'll get to in a minute. So when you came into the program for Chicago Blend, and I saw your resume and the things that you've done over LinkedIn, I was like, am I at the right place? Because I feel like, I am definitely not as qualified, to be in this space. But that was the imposter syndrome talking. Of course I am. But I was just really impressed with your background. And I think I've always wanted to have this kind of conversation with you to kind of understand your trajectory. Now I think I have a much better understanding of all of this that you've done.
Awesome. So the path to venture capital is something that I haven't even touched upon.
I know we're gonna head there. So actually, let's switch gears to that. Let's go to talk about venture capital, because I am curious about what sparked your interest in VC in the program.
Yeah. So that actually, I got to credit Argonne again. So I went through this Energy I-Core training twice, and University of Chicago, which manages both Argonne National Lab and Fermi National Lab, they offer for their own PhD students, so science PhDs, and for Argonne and Fermi Lab, a participation in this course. So the prerequisite was that you had to do this commercialization training. But for those who went through that, I got an email saying, hey, you guys have an opportunity to take this non-credit course by Professor Scott Meadow from the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And I was like, hey, that seems like a pretty easy lift. And it's the introduction to venture capital. I was like, well, I'm going to go sit and learn, sitting at home, like not a big deal. So I went through that course, and the more, like every single week, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do when I grow up. And and at the end of the course, Professor Maddow, he basically said, hey, if you like the content here, all of you attendees from the PhD program, the Fermi Lab, the Argonne staff, I invite you to audit my real MBA courses on commercializing innovation and private equity. And I was like, sign me up, a free course from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. So I did that for 2 quarters. I think I was the only one from that winter Zoom class who requested the opportunity to audit a non-auditable class. And I sat through all the lectures. I did all the work. And it was a lot of work. And I participated. I felt that I could actually contribute to my group's projects. And as I went through all of that, I learned about the Chicago Blends fellowship, venture capital fellowship, and I applied. Yeah. And I did not get in.
What?
It's true. I applied to the first cohort and I did not get in. And I was kind of crushed, and I wasn't sure what to do. I talked to one of the TAs in the course, and I got the advice to reach out to the powers to be in the Chicago Blend Fellowship and ask them why. Yeah. And I did. I reached out to Sal, and he was kind enough to sit down with me and describe to me that my vision was not clearly defined. Like, why do I want to be part of this fellowship? Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, you're right. I have no clue why. But I went back and I thought about it a little bit more, and I qualified my vision a little better. At the same time, in parallel kind of to all of these activities, I also learned about this concept of find your why. And I sat down, a friend of mine introduced me to this concept. I listened to the TED Talk and I followed the steps. I sat down with a different friend of mine and went through an exercise of defining why, what drives me? Why do I want to do what I do? I had a whole notebook on all of this, on this career exploration. I'm not kidding you.
I believe it. Trust me.
I approached this as a customer discovery exercise, and I identified individuals that had an interesting career path or were in an interesting place in their career. And I asked for their time and I interviewed them and I asked them, like, how did you get where you are? What did you need to get there? Did you get an MBA? Did you not get an MBA? Why you did what you did. And every one of them kind of helped guide me towards this direction of how to select what I want to do. Do I stay in the lab? Do I step out of the lab? What are these input and outputs, right? What is it that I want to do and when and why? I have to give credit to my friend who helped me define this. For the longest time in my LinkedIn, I had my aspirations listed as guiding a team to success, which I've had even before I had any hint of having a team, but that has always been my aspiration. And my pitch, my self-speaking pitch for finding my why is to build relationships and employ efficient processes in order to successfully bring ideas and innovations to life.
That's great. That's really great, actually. And I loved all the research that went on to find this. I love that.
And I didn't stop there. I continued interviewing people and I continued filling in that notebook. I think I filled it in completely. And I started a new one.
Does this book have like prompts Like, is this like
Yes.
because I want it. Like, you should send it to me so I can get it.
So, and this is a shameless plug. I am not affiliated. It is a TED talk by Simon Sinek, and it is called Start with Why. And there is a PDF free version of the guide of how to go about this. His organization makes money conducting these thought trainings in organizations or for individuals. But I just went and I took the free PDF and I followed the prompts, and I did that for another friend of mine as well.
Yeah. That's incredible. I love that. Definitely going to look all of that up. One follow-up question about our fellowship. I'm curious about your process. Like, what was your process like when it came to sourcing startups, for our blend assignments? And was your approach mostly like related to your background? Was it, startups about energy? Was it startups about these new technologies? Like, what was your blend experience? Like, how did you use your experience to source all these startups?
So, this is a good question. And when I came into the program, and I was very concerned that I will not be able to find any startups, that I have no network, I have no database. Developing the network was one of my goals into coming into the program, is to develop a network and really learn about the Chicago innovation ecosystem. So I was very concerned, but also where I live in DuPage County, and just down the street from me is a startup incubator called Innovation DuPage. And sometime prior to the program, I walked into their facility, their offices, and I said, "Hey, you're right here. You're a startup incubator. I don't need to go to Chicago to talk to startups. I would like to be useful and helpful." And I have volunteered there kind of unofficially as a mentor.
Okay.
And so a couple of the startups that I talked to came from that source. Another thing that was limiting for me is because I worked at Argonne, and midway through the program, I switched from a technical role at Argonne to the tech transfer office, which included actually the requirement or the responsibility of spinning out science into commercial, either startups or established companies. So in a way that created a conflict of interest with the goals of the fellowship. So I actually had to sit down and write conflict of interest management plan so that I do not undermine my job by sourcing startups specifically from Argonne and offering them this preferential treatment, because Argonne National Lab, it's publicly funded using your and mine taxpayer dollars. So the sensitivity to prevent even the perception of the conflict of interest is very high.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's like I never thought about it like that. And I mean, I imagine that made it a little bit more difficult for you because you have all this expertise, but you can't really be talking to the startups that are coming out of this your area. So wow, okay, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, and then there are a couple of programs at Argonne, like the Energy I-Core, and there are a couple of startups that kind of spun out from that. I could not talk to them. I
should have talked to you to make introductions for me. Wow.
Exactly. And then, the Chain Reaction Innovations program, which is the lab embedded entrepreneurship program that was run at Argonne. Again, I was not able to talk to any of the startups coming out of that program. And then I found that out kind of in the middle of the program.
Yeah.
So I was very concerned that I'm kind of pursuing these two separate paths, but they ended up really converging because of the skills that were needed, and the practice that we needed to put in place. I just needed to be careful in navigating that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, if you don't mind, can you send me those resources, like the that you mentioned, the programs, so that I can put it on the show notes for folks that might be curious about those startups, like connecting with those startups. But I want to shift gears a little bit to the Chicago Quantum Summit. I saw on LinkedIn that you recently attended, and I was really excited when I saw that you went, because honestly, I must admit that this is like the first time I'm learning about quantum efforts in Chicago. And I've been reading a lot of articles. One recently talking about how our governor, is committed to making Illinois like the hub of quantum development, and there's this big push for developing relationships and collaborating with experts all across the globe. So I was like, this is my time to talk to Elina and ask her to explain to me, what quantum is in normal people terms. So can you give me like a basic introduction to quantum science and quantum computing in like 5 minutes?
Yeah. So this is a good question, and the truth is that I think a little over a year ago, as I was shifting, careers from technical expertise to being into the commercial sector, one of the topics I was like, I really want to understand quantum. This is this new field. It's exciting. It's cool, and I really don't understand it. Right? I'm not a physicist. I don't have that background. I really want to understand it. And I verbalized it. And what I've learned throughout my history, I told you before, like once you verbalize something, it kind of happens. Yeah. And so I ended up, getting into these quantum conversations. So I still don't understand it very well, but I learned some of the language. So one of the things that I heard at during the Chicago Quantum Summit, and I really, it's not my answer, but I'm going to give it to you. And I can look up who said that. There was a question, hey, can you explain this to the audience in 5 minutes? What is quantum computing? And the answer is like, if I said it was kind of like magic, would that make it easier? and that's kind of the reality of it, because like if you look back 200 years ago, people didn't understand magnetism, and they would congregate and watch these two magnets being attracted to each other without any strings attached. And then of course now elementary school kids understand how magnets work, and in very simple terms. Mm-hmm. It's not a mystery anymore. So that's kind of like quantum. It's a difficult. If you want to start talking about physics, it's very difficult and complicated. But it is a way to transfer information over distances, right? Like you have this spin up, this spin down, and it mirrors. And I have no idea how it works, but it works differently than in the classic computing sense. So it was Stephanie Simmons from Photonic Inc. Is a Canadian company who said that. She's like, what is it quantum? If you are asking me to explain it, if I said it was kind of like magic, would it be easier to understand? So I really love that answer.
Yeah. Did they share any examples of like real world problems that like quantum computing can address better than the classic computers, like you mentioned?
Absolutely. So, and this is where everyone gets really excited, because quantum computing is projected to be extremely powerful compared to what the resources would be required doing the same kind of calculations with classical computing. So one of the applications would be developing new materials. Mm-hmm. Right now, up until very recently, the way we develop new materials, it's someone, stereotypically wearing a lab coat and safety glasses in the lab will start mixing different things in a beaker and like seeing what comes out of that. So it's a little bit like shooting in the dark. We now have the capability to do modeling of these materials, how they would interact with each other, and we can kind of predict and select out of 10,000 possible combinations the 10 that maybe we need to try in the lab and see how they work, which of course very much speeds up the discovery process. So materials, for construction, for energy conversion, for all kinds of synthesis that we can think of. So that's kind of one of them. And in the same kind of direction, medicine, pharmaceuticals, same thing. Historically, you just put some people in the lab and they kind of put some things in the beaker and come out with a little liquid or solid, and then they test it and see how it works. Well, now we have that ability to kind of start putting some of these models together and start predicting. So making that process much more efficient and faster is what quantum computing will allow us to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that additional explanation. I think I have also been very curious about how quantum computing can impact even also like in venture capital. It also seems like there's a lot of excitement around that technology. Right now, obviously, everybody's talking about AI, but I feel like there's so much that's coming on our way that a lot of us are not prepared for. But I think that's one of the things that's exciting about Chicago right now. Quantum computing, quantum technology, just in general, has everybody talking and they're excited about it.
Yeah, the one topic that doesn't get as much hype is quantum sensing. And it is still based on quantum technology, but it is the ability to sense with very high precision. And again, you could look at medical applications, and you could also look at like GPS-free navigation application as well. And the impacts that those technologies will have and those applications will have on the way we live. So it's like there is quantum computing and then there is quantum sensing. And the physics might be actually very similar, but because the application spaces are so different, they really are different technologies. So that is another area that I'm only now beginning to learn, just from the nature of the work that I do, and the company that I work for, making materials for quantum sensing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are so many potential benefits that quantum technologies are promising, basically. And I feel like right now we're at this early stage.
Yeah, we're definitely in a change point. One question you asked me that I didn't address is about impact of quantum, or the results of these quantum technologies, and how we see that in the investment side of things. And there is a lot of, from what I understand, there is a lot of hype in quantum investing, and then then you gotta dig a little deeper and look at what are these investments going for. And one the big area of investment has been algorithm development and actual like software preparation. Now, generally speaking, even looking back at my time in the Chicago Blend Venture Capital Fellowship, I have deep appreciation for software and computing because it allows us to do things. But my heart is in hardware and materials. So without the hardware, without the materials, no software is going to get you to where you need to be. So then the quantum investment kind of area, the materials generally are difficult to invest in because the investment horizon, the development horizon, and the investment horizon do not match, and the levels of investments that are needed for developing new materials generally are well beyond the comfort level of run-of-the-mill venture capitalists who want to get a 10x return in 10 years. So there is this mismatch in the investment industry and in the materials development industry across the board. And of course, it is visible in quantum. So when you look at the number of quantum startups, a very small fraction of them would be based on actual hardware development. And the majority of the investments would go into the algorithm and software development startups.
Thank you for indulging me in this quantum conversation. So let's go back to your journey. After our VC fellowship, you recently got a new job at the Great Lakes Crystal Technologies, is it? Can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so my role is business development. So in the most basic way to look at it is attracting commercial customers and making commercial sales of our diamond products. And what does it mean? It means exploring all these different application spaces and industries that can use diamond, single crystal, high quality single crystal diamond substrates. And it could be quantum sensing, it could be quantum computing, it could be high power electronics, radiation hard detectors, and other applications that so I suddenly need to become an expert in all of these technical areas.
And I guess on that note, like for any people that are interested in learning about new technologies, new innovation, what advice do you share?
New innovation and new technologies. Diversify your sources, I would say. So a lot of reading, a lot of listening before you start asking questions. Absorb, be a sponge. And I think the algorithms that suggest you news and articles on your phone or other news media sourcing platform is pretty good. Once you start like following and reading certain articles, it will feed you more and more. But I would say, just keep on soaking it up. Blogs are good, podcasts are good, summits, conferences are really good. I know a lot of investors who regularly and routinely attend technical conferences.
I think one last question before we start wrapping up. I'm curious about like your future goals, particularly within VC, with your investing in general. Like, is that something that you're looking to continue on in the future, as in like angel investing, or maybe having a fund one day? Like, what are some of the goals that you have around VC?
Oh, a good question about that. So, as we were going through the fellowship program, pretty quickly I realized that the standard path is not for me. That path of, starting it as an associate level and then kind of going up through the ranks of a venture capital fund. And I also kind of pretty soon realized that I do not want to run my own fund.
Yeah.
I do not want to go through that fundraising. So I converged on a possible role that I could play on a partner level. Now, that is not a quick and easy role to step into. And again, this is what I think I want to be when I grow up. But it might change. I may have a chance to do a partner-like activity and decide I don't like that. So that's also possible. So I'm not looking at the venture capital role as my, future goal. I'm more interested in exploring how do I qualify that option. And a good way, can I be a part-time partner? I know I've heard people can do that. Can I be an advisor, like a technical advisor?
Absolutely.
And see a little bit more from the inside of the structure, what that life looks like, and do I want to have that life? So I think these are my kind of next step milestones, is to even understand if that is something to continue pursuing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your transparency. I definitely think that you would be a fantastic advisor, especially like with your technical expertise and all the things that you bring to the table. So, well, for anyone that's interested in connecting with you, with having maybe some coffee or learning more about your path, like how can people connect with you?
LinkedIn is a good spot. So reach out to me. I tend not to accept random connections. If we haven't met, but you have an interest, send a note, say, hey, I really am interested in this and that. And then, we'll connect and we'll chat. The role that I have now, it's a rapidly growing startup environment. So, time is measured in dog years. So that means I am quite busy, and it might take me a while to get back and find some time to chat with folks. But I like making connections. I enjoy learning from new people. I enjoy connecting new people to existing people and vice versa. When I see that this connection could result in some mutually beneficial conversation. So absolutely welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me today and for this conversation. I feel like I learned so much in just the last hour than I've had all week. And I know that you're busy, so thank you for making the time.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I would say thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to be featured in your podcast. It's the first time for me. I want you to know.
And you did great.
So this is it makes me feel very important.
You are. Trust me. Well, thank you again, and I hope I see you very soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Chicago Techies Podcast. If you enjoyed listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. Let's continue the conversation on social media. We are at Chicago Techies on all social media platforms. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.